Hey everybody, what's going on? Jim Cirilla and Tanya Klein here from Coverage Inc., the leader in screenplay analysis, development, and editing services for 24 years. 2002, can you believe it, Tanya? I can't. I don't feel a day over 24. I don't know what to tell you, but I'm excited for what you're going to be delivering to us today. What's our topic?
Our topic is consider versus consider with reservations. What's the difference? What does it mean? And that's especially important right now because we've got Get Rep Now going on. And so often we do get the question, well, but my script got to consider with reservations. Isn't that kind of like a consider? Not
Okay.
quite. So we figured we're going to go through the difference between the two. And first of all, if you got a consider with reservations, congratulations. Good job. You're definitely on your way.
Yeah. Yeah, I have some reservations about this topic. Okay. So let's look at some numbers. Okay, so consider with reservations, also known as a soft consider, it's got different terminology in different places, but consider with reservations at Coverage Inc. is around the top 15% of scripts that we get in. And that's for script, okay? There's also consider for writer. But, generally speaking, a script that's going to be elevated is going to be, a consider for script. Okay. And then the scripts that score a consider for script are generally around the top 2 to 3%. Okay. Consider for writer, it's a little bit more lenient. Generally, we see a lot of times where scripts have a lot of talent or craft on the page. Story isn't quite there yet, so maybe you'll get a consider for writer, but a consider with reservations for script. That happens all the time. Or consider with reservations for writer and pass for script. But generally speaking, consider with reservations, like you said, Tanya, that means you're in pretty good shape. You're in around the top 15%. Is it good enough for us to elevate to our manager panel? Not quite yet.
Yeah, so basically, here's the way to think about it. If an assistant to a producer, a reader at an agency or at a studio gives something a consider, that means, hi, I'm handing this to my boss.
Yeah.
Now, if my boss disagrees with me or is upset that I'm wasting his or her time,
Right.
that reflects negatively on me.
Yeah.
So basically, look, in this town, nobody gets fired for a no. They do, however, get fired for a yes. Basically, a consider means I am confident this will not get me fired. I am confident that my boss will appreciate this read, even if it's something that my boss eventually passes on. It will not reflect negatively on me. At the very least, my boss will see that I have a good story sense, so I can spot a good writer.
Yeah.
So basically, what a consider needs to do, it needs to convince someone that this is worthy of elevation.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of CYA going on at agencies, management companies, production companies in Hollywood. And that is because people don't want to lose their jobs. And they know if their boss, I mean, look, if they've got a good relationship with their boss and their boss, is a reasonable person, we all understand that we don't necessarily agree with everybody's opinion all the time. But there's plenty of horror stories of people who elevated a script. They give it a consider. The boss takes it home, reads it over the weekend, sets aside the 2 hours that they would have spent playing with their kids or whatever. And then they come into the office Monday morning and it's like, you're done here, because they didn't agree. So
also, hang on, acronym police here. You might want to explain to people what CYA means.
If you don't know what CYA means, you probably haven't been in Hollywood long enough. It means cover your R's. So, all right. Let's also explain how the possible difference between Coverage Inc.'s consider and consider with reservations versus some other companies who work in the same space as us, that being, screenplay analysis companies. Okay. We work with the philosophy of real world here at Coverage Inc. Okay. We also, when we elevate scripts to our manager panel, we don't want them coming back to us and resenting us for wasting their time. And this has happened in the past where, they disagree with our opinions and we send them our Get Rep Now scripts and they're like, no, 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 no. And, we always try to learn. We always try to keep things, cool and find out exactly why they're giving us that opinion. But basically, it's what the takeaway after doing this for, I think this is our 11th year of Get Rep Now. The takeaway is that the industry metrics for a consider, the bullseye keeps getting smaller. Other companies might give you a consider while it might be a consider with reservations at Coverage Inc.
In the real world, or for the real world, this is not an advantage. It doesn't do you any good. You
Right.
need to actually get to the point where, well, you get legit considers. Otherwise, you're not going to break into this industry, period.
Yeah, and it could also be the perception of the reader just might not be there. They might not be experienced enough. Look, we've done this plenty of times, Tanya, where we try out a reader who has some industry experience, but they're a little bit green, and we're like, okay, let's give them a try. And then we see their first couple of coverages, and we're like, this person's ability to judge is just not where it should be yet. It's the type of thing that a lot of it is just innate. And a lot of it is experience, and so, look, I'm not saying we're the shit, I'm not saying we're the only place you should go, although, well, I am saying that really. No, but but what I'm trying to say is we are trying to replicate a real world experience here at Coverage Inc. Okay. So if people maybe hate on us because, you get a consider with reservations or a pass from Coverage Inc., whereas your script was a consider or better somewhere else. Okay, well, great. I'm glad that other person, responded to that degree. But in our opinion, more work needs to be done to get you across the finish line, and that is to get you industry attention. Now, let's go back to our topic, which is consider with reservations versus consider. So
exactly. So basically, consider with reservations means you're probably not that far off. You might be 2, 3, 4 drafts away from actually getting a consider. And one. Yeah. I mean, the reason why a reader will give a script to consider with reservations as opposed to consider, well, first of all, the reader thinks there's definitely something there. This is a great foundation. The script's got a lot going for it. However, there are some concerns that need addressing, and those concerns could be story, they could be plot logic, they could be structure, or the character arcs don't really make sense or aren't there, or the dialogue needs a little bit more work to be less on the nose. It could be any number of things. However, basically what consider with reservations means, this script is well on its way. However, it's not quite there yet. It needs a bit more work.
Yeah, and let's just go back to what we were saying before briefly about, people doing the CYA thing. It could also mean if you're in a, professional situation, it could be the script is a stone consider. It's solid, but the reader might still go, I don't know if my boss is going to get it. There's too many things here that I think are great. I'm not sure how my boss is going to respond. I'll just go with consider with reservations and cover my butt.
Yeah, I mean, I think is in particular when it comes to production companies.
Yeah.
If the script is fantastic, they love it. However, the assistant is worried about lack of marketability.
There's a certain proclivity that I have seen from writers, including not from writers, I'm sorry, from readers, screenplay readers, including from Coverage Inc. readers. I've seen this happen. We've definitely seen this happen, where the quality of the writing itself is so strong that it creates a sense of goodwill that is propulsive throughout the whole script. And so we're captivated by the voice or the character development or whatever it is in the first 10, 15, 20 pages. And we're like, oh, this is a good script. And, you're reading, turning the pages quickly and you're really into it. And then by the time you get to the end, you're like, this is a consider. But did you really pay attention to the story and all the little things that don't quite track, all the little plot holes? What I'm saying is we tend to overlook a lot of things that are legit problems just because the writing craft is good. And I'm going to give you an example, Tanya. We just got our own script back from Coverage yesterday, which we submitted under a pseudonym. And the past 2 or 3 readers who read it, we got to consider. We got, we got very high marks. We got good notes as well. The reader who just read it this time was more perceptive than the other readers and was able to see past the quality of the craft and dug in and found plot holes that none of the other 3 readers who read it previously got. And we were like, whoa, this reader is gold. And we immediately promoted her to CI Pro level and sent her an email thanking her for her incredible perceptivity. So anyway, the point is, if your craft on the page is really, really good, that will buy you a lot of goodwill. And a lot of people who are maybe not reading as carefully as they could be, or just not as may not be as perceptive as others, that could be enough. And hey, a lot of movies get made because of that. And we're like, how the hell did this ever get slipped by? And that's partly why. So be aware, that is a phenomenon. It happens all the time. Tanya, I want to ask you, because you read a lot more scripts than I do of late. What is it? Can you quantify it? Like what makes a script a consider for you? What pushes it over from a consider with reservations? Because I know lots of times you'll come to me and you'll say, I'm on the fence about this one, and then in the end you're always, you make that judgment. What is there a certain thing, or is it a combination of things? What is it exactly?
Basically, for me, the difference between look, I give a consider with reservations when there are just too many. I mean, again, you can overlook some things, but when there are too many, even if they're little things add up if there are too many of them. For example, if you have, some of the dialogue doesn't land and there are some plot logic concerns, that's one item too many. That's not a consider, that's a consider with reservations. Or sometimes you have one big item, like everything works great. However, suddenly we get to the midpoint and everything kind of craters and it falls flat because, so the plot logic doesn't hold up, or the protagonist disappears, or the protagonist suddenly loses agency, or the story we thought we were being told is not the story that's actually happening. So we have out of left field stuff that's being thrown in there because the writer doesn't know how to actually get to where they need to go. So sometimes you have everything's working and awesome, but then something happens. That's a big thing and it just doesn't work. Or sometimes where it's like, okay, I mean, a lot of things work. I have notes. Can the writer address those notes? Mm-hmm. Because sometimes it's like, okay, so this is close. This is really close. However, let's give the writer the notes. Can they address the notes, fix it, bring it back? Then it might be consider. But again, that also depends on the writer's ability to address notes.
So, okay, yeah. So we can we can always tell the writer's craft and style ability on the page, and whether, we can form a pretty darn good judgment as to whether they're going to be able to take the notes and implement the notes just by, what we're reading in the first place. We can usually tell how many drafts away a writer may be to get something across the finish line just by what is evidenced on the page. But, there's another circumstance, and that is there are sometimes, we'll give a script to consider with reservations that we know the writer will never get it across the finish line. And that's because the craft level is not there. They've got a great idea. That happens all the time. They've got a great big idea, and, maybe the execution is kind of middling or so-so. And we're like, this writer, if they were, had about 3 or 4 more years experience under their belt, they could probably lick it. And of course, please go away and try and address the notes as best you can. It often takes many drafts to solve problems, as we always talk about, to your last death, Tanya, and the 27 drafts in a year and a half it took us to get our first consider before that script was ready to shoot. But oftentimes, if it's a great script, you might go, oh, wow, I'm really close. I've got to consider with reservations. And then, you get 10 more sets of coverage over the next year from us or whoever, or you send it in to contests and you never make it past the quarterfinals. And again, that's because people love the idea, or they love the energy, or there's something about it that they really love, but it's just not, the craft level is not where it needs to support that idea yet.
Yeah. But so you got Consider with Reservations. You are on your way. Don't give up. Keep at it. Address the notes.
Consider with Reservations for script is validation. Even if it's not a consider yet, even if it's not, well, okay, I won this contest, or Coverage Inc. is sending me to the manager panel. Even if that's not happening this year, it means you've got something. Keep going.
And with that, if you have any questions, you can always reach us at info@coverageinc.com.
Thanks for watching, folks. Please like and subscribe, and please hit the notification bell, because that tells the algorithm that we exist. And we will see you guys in the next video.